Live from Emerson College in beautiful downtown Boston, this is the Jeff Santos Show. Rebuilding America, together, investing, activism, and supporting the middle class.
Past the hour, it is the Jeff Santos Show. 772-925-8206 is the phone number to join us, and we'll be talking to our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield in a couple of minutes. Just a couple of things, folks, want to pass along. Again, we talked about it. Thomas Frank will be with us tomorrow, and the 4 o'clock hour for the entire hour, taking your phone calls at, again, 772-925-8206. If you want to go ahead and find a way to, not around to call at that time, if you want to email me your questions, you can do so. Of course, Jeff with a J at revolutionboston.com. We're still working on Reverend Barber for Thursday, and we have a call into Senator Warren's office. She has been on the warpath against Donald Trump. And so we're going to try to get the senator, who has not been very good in appearing on radio and now TV shows. So we are looking forward to having Miss Warren on the program over the coming weeks. All right. Our next guest comes to us from the great city of Seattle, Washington. Of course, he's a regular here every Tuesday. You can check him out on Daily Kos. Check him out on Twitter. And it is always great to talk to our good friend, Mr. Mark Taylor-Canfield. Happy Tuesday, Mark.
Hey, Jeff. I'm calling from rainy Seattle, where it's been, 60 degrees and cloudy for days now. And so welcome to summer in the Emerald City, right? We had a DJ party down on the waterfront on Sunday, and half the people left because there was a thunderstorm rolling in across Elliott Bay. Boy. So there you go.
Well, lightning
soon,
can be.
I'm sure.
I hope so. That Bumbershoot Festival happen yet? Isn't it usually in August?
Yes, it's coming up, and so is Hemp Fest, which is the largest cannabis festival in the world, where I'll be speaking, and my old band is going to be playing there, so we're going to have a good time. And yeah, it's going to be great, but I'm just hoping that summer comes back. That's just the way Seattle is. Sometimes it's summer, and then in the middle of summer, it's fall, and it just lasts for a month or so, and eventually it comes back to it.
Oh, it sounds like a New England 24-hour period. Speaking of New England, your boys, the Pearl Jam, were in town at Fenway Park over the weekend, so we had a little bit of a Seattle feel in Boston at the home of the Red Sox. And your Seattle Mariners, we forget about this last week, split the series with the Red Sox last week at Safeco. So lots of ties going back and forth between Boston and Seattle. All right. There is a Seattle connection.
By the way, Jeff,
go right ahead.
Temple of the Dog is out there touring too, and those are some local guys here, like Duff McKagan, who was in Guns N' Roses, and the guys from Soundgarden and Alice in Chains that have gotten together, and they have a group called Temple of the Dog, which is selling out everywhere they go. It's just like impossible to get tickets, but that's actually a tribute to a singer that inspired a lot of the grunge scene here, and folks like Kurt Cobain.
Sure.
That was a guy named Andy Wood is who they're dedicating that project to, and that it originally came from an album that was a collaborative project many years ago between all those bands. Well, they decided to get back together and hit the road, so
that's
they're
awesome.
Selling out everywhere. Yeah,
well, I got to check them out if they're going to come on the East Coast. Try to make that happen. Well, Seattle, and you were on the East Coast. You were in Philadelphia a couple of weeks back, the Democratic Convention. We missed each other, which is unfortunate, but maybe I just have to make that trip to Seattle or meet you in Chicago or something like that. But, one of the things, Mark, that came out of Seattle was the idea that a lot of progressives, not only those who were delegates and so forth, but a lot of progressives were, pushing for Bernie. And a couple of them ran on his platform and recently won. Talk to me about those who won in the congressional races and some running down ballot as well, that were basically both endorsed by Bernie Sanders as well as, talking about his issues.
Well, there were 37 candidates in Washington State running in the local primaries at all levels, from the governor's office down, including our friend David Spring ran for the office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. He's a teacher, and we've had a huge education funding crisis in Washington State, which has led to a state Supreme Court decision that our own state legislature is violating our Constitution. That's a story for another time, but for Teacher Tuesday, this
Sure.
is a good subject. Several other educators, Wes Irwin ran for the State House of Representatives, but what happened, Jeff, is unfortunately we had a 34% voter turnout. This is a mail-in balloting system. Yeah, and this is mail-in balloting, so people had weeks to decide when they wanted to drop off or mail their ballots.
Now,
So that's sad.
let me ask you, Mark, because your brothers and sisters to the south there in Oregon have been using the mail system for a long time, and it's apparently done very well. Is there a difference between how they do it in Oregon and what they're doing in Washington State? Have they not really figured it out yet, or is it people not used to it, or what do you think is the difference?
I think Oregon actually probably used Washington State partly as a model, but and vice versa. But there is just a sense of apathy, I think, in the voting public. Also, there was this phenomenon here where a lot of the Berniecrats and a few of the incumbents, by the way, won big time, and we can talk about that. But some of the other candidates were completely boycotted by the local and national media, so people didn't even know they were running. And in some of the counties in Washington State, it's been reported that the counties didn't even send out voter pamphlets to folks in the mail. They relied on online, contact with the voters, because they claim, as they keep claiming all over the country when it comes to these voting machines, that there's just not enough money, apparently, for democracy. But
not enough money,
that was an issue.
It's outrageous.
Yeah, it was a big issue. A lot of the folks just got dissed by the local media. In fact, there was a famous incident here between, Wes Irwin, who refused to endorse Hillary Clinton, and some foul language, that was printed in the local Stranger magazine about him because of that. So it stirred up a lot of controversy. But folks like Parmila Jayapal, who's taking on Jim McDermott's seat now that he's retiring, she did great. She got a big percentage of the vote. Also, our friend Nicole Frame.
Right, got to meet Nicole in Philadelphia, yeah.
She did well, and also Bob Hasagawa, who's also a friend of mine, former labor leader here in Seattle. They all did very well as incumbents, Berniecrats, which is kind of fighting, the trend, because we're thinking that, the new Berniecrats are going to be the folks that have just joined the election process for the first time and they're first-time candidates. Well, no, Bob Hasagawa, Parmila Jayapal, are longtime incumbents in this state, and they did great on the Berniecrat platform. So even within the more established members of the Democratic Party, following this new progressive trend is doing them quite well in the polls, and they're doing great. The Republicans did not do well at all. There's very little to report there, Jeff. They, I think, just hit the road.
Maybe that's a sign of things to come around the country, by the way, as we have seen some polls out that show Hillary Clinton ahead in Georgia and going up on television in Arizona. So potentially Utah could be up for grabs, particularly now that this independent McMullen, who is a Mormon, potentially could take votes away. So it could be, we could be looking at a 1964 landslide here if things keep going. Although, I will say this, the problem with that idea is the electronic voting machines. Now, I saw your tweet yesterday, and we've been talking about this on the show for a long time, and I'm wondering what you're hearing here, because looked at a Quinnipiac poll today that showed a 4-point lead in Ohio, which is basically margin of error, and of course, in Florida, it's a dead heat, according to Quinnipiac. Those are two states that the Republicans control the Secretary of State's office, the governor's office, and the state legislature. So there's full control. If you are close, within, say, 3 points, 2 points or so, all of a sudden you could flip a few votes. And there you go, and there goes the election. Now, you're going to need more than those two states, particularly if Clinton ends up winning Georgia and Arizona and all these other places, then, those two won't make a difference. But if it comes down, as it has in over the last few years, that Ohio and Florida and maybe Iowa and a few other states are determinative, then all of a sudden, these election voting machines, if they're working and they're not working correctly, and they're being, used in criminal ways, if you might, by Republicans and others, then all of a sudden this election can change like that. Your thoughts on that and what you've investigated?
Oh, I just hope we're not held hostage by Ohio and Florida again. This would be too much of deja vu for me, I think, to stand this time.
I agree.
In any state where the Secretary of State is Republican and it's a swing state, that's an alarm bell going off right there. So I'm worried. A lot of other people are worried that a close election is going to be hard to count, no matter what, because each state has a completely different set of voting standards. They use different technologies and different machines. Now, some states have instituted reforms and replaced some of the old machines that are completely insecure and unsecured, but not all of the states have done that. And even the states who use paper ballots oftentimes use counting machines, so there has to be some kind of a process to legitimize the election by comparing those two totals at the end. And if people see exit polls which are 30 percentile off of the ballot results, I don't even want to think about that, Jeff. Right now, I think people just want to concentrate on this new progressive movement, and I just hope, I just don't want it to see it again where, why we should just give the election, I guess, to Ohio and Florida and let them battle it out, right? Because the rest of us, we get left on the sidelines sometimes watching this happen because of this polarization in the country between the blue and red states, which has been going on for almost a generation now. I mean, the polarization that's happened, and that's been, I think, encouraged by a lot of corporate media, and less than legitimate journalism is a sad thing when it comes down to this. 50% of the country wants to go one way, 50% goes the other way. So whoever gets elected, half the country isn't happy. It's a tough.
Well, and we have two corporate candidates. One who's a real estate developer, and the other one who's taken a ton of money, including the $600,000 from Wall Street. So, there isn't a lot of excitement. That being said, in my view, and this is what I'm telling my listeners, is that if you're in a swing state, Ohio, Florida, Iowa, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Virginia, Colorado, Nevada, then, in my opinion, you have to vote for Hillary Clinton. We can't afford to have this law and order guy who will go after minorities, go after Muslims and Latinos and African Americans, and let loose with that kind of mentality would be a crisis for this country. Never mind, really, as we talked yesterday with our good friend Lawrence Korb, former Reagan administration defense official, we'd have no idea what Trump's foreign policy would be. On one hand, he seems to want to, make love to Putin. On the other hand, he's going to blow up everybody and go after the families of the terrorists. So, you really don't know where he's coming from. So I think that's important there. But at the same time, places like where you and I live in Washington State and Massachusetts, where Hillary Clinton is expected to win, I hope that people, look at Jill Stein or other progressive candidates that are out there in minor parties, and, continue the Bernie platform. That to me is really important, to sort of be able to do this, because it's a stupid electoral college system. I would hope that somebody starts talking about this to do away with it. I know that there are people out there that have signed petitions for the popular vote to be the only way. And again, most European countries do that. So it's not that big a deal, but we're still living in the 18th century, it seems, when it comes to the issue of how we vote. It's sad.
Well, it's the same as the issue with funding of public education, K through 12 in Washington State. What's lacking is the political will, and there is a lack of political will, regardless of all this talk against Citizens United. I mean, a lot of the candidates who are speaking against Citizens United have actually benefited from that Supreme Court decision. But, except for Bernie Sanders and probably Jill Stein, I would think that it's a very reasonable position to express your vote by voting for someone who is an up-and-coming progressive populist like Jill Stein, who can get your message out there if you're in a state where Hillary has, got it sewed up. I mean,
right.
I think that that's a reasonable position, and people should think about Jill Stein, and regardless of who they vote for, should really support her. I mean, literally with money, and volunteer your time, put up signs, let people know, talk to your family, let them know that there is an alternative out there, and that eventually maybe this alternative could actually hold the Democrats accountable for some of their less than stellar performance on progressive issues like, the TPP and fracking and things like that. So there does need to be pressure, a political pressure, regardless of the results of this election, and it's not going to come from the corporate wing of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. It's going to come from some progressive movement that will pick up all of this enthusiasm and support that Bernie Sanders was able to achieve. It is totally possible for a third party or independent candidate to gain a lot of votes, and potentially mathematically at this point could potentially even win the White House if they were able to attract enough disaffected Republican and Democratic voters, because, the 50% of the country says they're independent now. But even outside of that, it's still a great thing to support someone and do what Hillary Clinton said, and Ted Cruz said, right? Vote with your conscience. And if you can't do it with your vote with your feet and with your money and your time and your social networking skills, because I think Jill Stein deserves support. She deserves to be heard, and she's speaking directly to issues that I don't think the other candidates are going to touch, so get her into the debate. That would be awesome. I do not want to see Jill Stein get arrested trying to get into the presidential debate this year, like, we saw with Ralph Nader.
Right, and others.
That would not be good, yeah.
No, talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. The phone number to join us, 772-925-8206. And, I just look at where we are in our society today in America, and, we have fallen behind on healthcare, fallen behind on infrastructure, fallen behind on education, and even more importantly, which is really the foundation of any democracy, is how we vote. And, we always, as we were just talking about, dependent upon half a dozen states. Now, why is it that, if you're in the largest state in the country, in California, or the third largest state in the case of New York, that your vote really is not going to be looked at as important? In the end result, it will be. But the fact is that we don't pay attention to it. So the issues that are going on in say, upstate New York don't get talked about. Or, in Fresno, California. This to me is outrageous. And somebody, and I'm hoping that whether it's Jill Stein or somebody else, should start talking about this. It's obviously very beneficial to a third party to not to have the electoral college system, because now you can, try to configure a different way, to win. You don't have to worry about, getting to 270. It's a different structure, and you get more votes out of California, more votes out of New York, out of more liberal states, then all of a sudden, you can figure out a way to win the election. Any thoughts? Anybody at all in Washington State bringing this issue up? Because to me, it's once again, it's an embarrassment in this country to have this structure.
Well, there are proposals that the Green Party actually has been putting forward for at least 10 years that I know of. I remember seeing a really funny and informative video with John Cleese, the Monty Python comedian, talking about these issues as a Green Party member from the UK, but he was speaking to Americans about how to approach your local political representatives and how to run initiatives and referendums calling for things like instant runoff voting and proportional representation, which is something that is more of a parliamentary tradition where if your party gets, 5% of the vote, then you get 5% of the seats in the parliament. And in the United States, because of the winner-take-all system, most third and independent parties get pushed aside. Now, this year, the two parties are so split that it's really an opportunity for independent organizers. But, Trump himself is such a divisive character that he has this ability to, push people to one side or the other and force them to make a decision. But I think if we look at the future of the Democratic Party in Washington State and probably other parts of the country where the Berniecrat phenomena is so popular. And by the way, folks can go to Berniecrat.net to get information about your local candidates that are running as Berniecrats. And it's an omni-party movement, I think, as we mentioned before. So there is no necessary party affiliation to run as a Berniecrat. It's just a sort of loose sense of authenticity and principles, and the way you raise money to run as a candidate, and in a lot of ways your endorsement of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party or the Greens or Bernie Sanders, because that is part of the movement. I think that's going on is actually reaching out beyond the Democratic Party and the Green Party and involving a lot of independents and new parties that are popping up as well. But this coalition style of organizing and this idea of proportional representation and instant runoff voting, which we do have in Washington State, by the way, in our primaries, we have moved ahead on that. Another issue, of course, is public financing of the campaigns. And in Washington, in Seattle, we are apparently the first city in the country to actually offer voting voucher coupons to each registered voter. So they're going to get a check in the mail, not a check, but a voucher in the mail. I think $50 per person, like 2 checks of $25, and you get to send that to whatever candidate you want to send it to. But then those candidates that are involving themselves in this public financing proposal, they have refused to accept above a certain, predetermined limit and no outside contributions. So that's a new trend, and we're hoping in Seattle that will sort of be another innovative way of approaching politics that might spread around the rest of the country, because it gives each voter the opportunity to spend public money for the candidate of their choice. So, the city is going to send you that voucher. They're not going to tell you who to give it to. And that gives you the freedom to sort of be your own lobbyist in your own, grassroots pressure group, because each candidate is going to be wanting to get that $25 from you so that they can get another, ad on television or something.
Yeah,
but in Europe and when I was in the UK, I've said this before too, the parliamentary elections lasted about a month. There was a strict limit in the amount of money that could be spent, and it was publicly financed. So that gets around a lot of these issues of corporations controlling the election. I mean, politics are still crazy no matter what the
No, they still are, and there's still going to be corrupt officials, as there are in Europe, as an example, or in other parts of the world too. But when you have the structure that it's all about raising money, and a reformer comes in from Berkeley, California, or Seattle, or Cambridge, Massachusetts, and wants to do the right thing, and then in order to get reelected year after year after year, if you're running in for Congress, it's every 2 years you got to raise money. And if you have a primary, you got to raise money for that. And then if it's a competitive seat, you do it that way as well. There are fewer competitive seats, unfortunately, because the way the gerrymander goes. It's another thing that, is done. California is probably the only state in the country that I think has figured out the whole gerrymander thing. When you have 2 Democrats, as we did this past primary season with Sanchez, Congresswoman Sanchez, and Attorney General Harris, ending up in the final 2, not a Republican and a Democrat. And I think that actually maybe bodes well, because that's an independent system that Schwarzenegger set up with the Democratic Assembly and Senate. But these are all things that need to happen, and I think that a lot of the millennials want it to happen, Mark, and hopefully it will. Hey, we'll talk next Tuesday. Yeah, no, I agree. We'll talk next Tuesday. A little Seattle sound for you. Shane, and good afternoon, Americans, and welcome to the Jeff Santos Show. We are live in Studio A on the campus of Emerson College. It is great to be with you on this 9th of August, 2016. We got a great program for you. We're going to talk about charter schools in the African-American community. Not very happy with charter schools, and whether they're going to slow it down or end it, we don't know. But we'll talk to Rachel Cohen, who wrote about it in the American Prospect, coming up in a few minutes. Then we'll talk to Mark Taylor-Canfield. He was in Philadelphia with a lot of Washington State representatives, including those running for Congress on the Bernie Sanders ticket, or the Bernie Sanders platform, if you might. They won in their primary fights. We'll talk more about all of that coming up. We'll also, of course, take your calls at 772-925-8206. Coming up in the 5 o'clock hour, Marla Kilfoyle will join us at about 5:34. We'll also talk with our good friend Robert Craig for the entire hour coming up at 5 o'clock. All those watching on MNN and FSTV.org, please go over to JeffSantosShow.com in the 5 o'clock hour. All right, we're going to start something new right now before we get to Rachel, and that is a little commentary. We're going to kind of pick a song that kind of goes along with the commentary, just to give you guys a little entertainment for the whole prospect here. And, you know, a lot of people feel that it is going to be a difficult time for Bernie Sanders supporters coming up, and a lot of people feel that there is a great opportunity to kind of coalesce behind Hillary Clinton. And for those of you who are in Florida or Ohio, you may feel like you're alone, as the song states. But even more importantly, it is really important for you to continue the Bernie Sanders ideas. And if you live in Massachusetts, or New York, or California, where Hillary Clinton's probably going to win by 8 to 10 points, if not more, then it seems to me that the best thing for you to do is to vote your conscience and continue to build up the progressive movement. Maybe that's voting for Jill Stein and the Green Party, or writing in Bernie Sanders, whatever you want to do. But I want to be very clear about this. Those are states that, again, that are not going to be competitive in the fall. For those states in Florida, Ohio, Nevada, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Virginia, you're going to have to vote for Hillary Clinton, because we are at a point right now in our society that we cannot afford to have somebody at the trigger that will release the hounds when it comes to law and order. We have too many people in this country who are ready to sort of give up civil liberties and follow a leader who can bamboozle them because he thinks their lives will be better if we knock a bunch of heads around. This, to me, cannot be given the power of the presidency. Cannot be given the microphone, really, because it inspires those folks, like the individual Mr. Ruth in South Carolina, to take things into his own hands. We can't afford that kind of situation. The violence in this country is at a peak right now, and we need to reduce it, not increase it. So you may feel on your own, Bernie Sanders supporters, and as the song says, like a rolling stone, may not necessarily feel great that your guy didn't win. My guy didn't win. But follow your head. Swing state, vote Hillary, vote your conscience on the other side. All right, that's the first of what we hope is mini commentaries. Next time we'll get the Dylan rendition as well. All right, our next guest comes to us from the American Prospect magazine, and she has written a great story on black organizations say no, or at least slow down, to charter schools. Our next guest is Rachel Cohen of the American Prospect, and Rachel joins us via Skype today. Rachel, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Hi. It's great to have you on the program. Well, I was really enticed by your piece. And again, you can go to the American Prospect website and check it out. The organization, the headline, Black organizations say no or at least slow down to charter schools. This was published in yesterday's edition. Now, let me ask you, were you surprised when you went to the NAACP that they were going to address this issue? How did it come up, Rachel?
Well, they've been addressing charter schools for a while. They introduced a resolution at their convention in 2010 and again in 2014 related to charter schools. This was the first time that they came out calling for a national moratorium on them, but they have previously issued policy statements raising concerns about the degree to which charter schools are exacerbating segregation, they're concerned with the privatization of schools. They're concerned with sort of taking money away from traditional public schools. So the NAACP has a history of raising concerns with charter schools, but this latest resolution is significant because they actually come out and call for a national moratorium on opening new ones.
Well, that's great news to hear. We're in fact to be up front, sponsored by the American Federation of Teachers and in alliance with the Badass Teachers. So the unions have been very much against this, but I think now when you look at what happens in the African American community, and I'm looking at the photograph, which is making me laugh, of the young students at the International Yoga Day at the New Standard Charter School in Flint, Michigan. Of course, we all know what has been happening in Flint recently. Well, the young kid is yawning as we look at the photograph, which is kind of funny. In places like Flint, and what you've been able to research, Rachel, have they seen the fact that these charter schools have come in? They take a lot of dollars away from a very poor community. We saw, up front and up close and personal, unfortunately, with the water crisis that they had there. I can only imagine that if you have a charter school, being plumped right in the middle of a community like that, there are obviously some eyebrows open, to this. What were your thoughts when you talk to people in Flint or people at the NAACP maybe represent Michigan?
Well, a couple things. I was not at the NAACP's convention. I just I was reporting on the resolution that came out of it, but that was made public by people who were at the convention.
Okay.
So, it should be said, obviously, part of what I wrote about in my piece is that there is divisions amongst Black-led organizations and civil rights groups over charter schools and other tenets of the education reform community. So it's significant that both the NAACP and the Movement for Black Lives Coalition, which is led by over 60 Black-led groups across the country, that they both called for moratoriums. But there are, other civil rights groups and Black-led organizations that are very supportive. So that's sort of, those tensions are sort of what I tried to get at in my piece. So it's, there's not a singular Black position on these schools. But the sort of new calls for moratoriums are very significant and noteworthy, and so that's what I was trying to get at. And I think what you were just raising is there is a concern, and this is what they talk about. In both of these groups raise the concerns about how the rapid expansion of charter schools affects the funding available at traditional public schools, which are already underfunded in a lot of ways. So I think that is a concern that a lot of people, even charter supporters, have concerns about that. But, this idea of funding two separate public school systems with a limited and often shrinking pot of tax dollars is hard, and it's resulting in a lot of cuts in a lot of places. Philadelphia is a city where you see these fights between traditional public schools and charter schools playing out very intensely because it can lead to school closures and or schools cutting resources and counselors and arts programs. And so this is something that we're seeing. You see it in Boston. I'm sure that you follow that. So this is something that basically every city that has charters and traditional public schools is dealing with. Sort of how do you fund something like that? How do you equitably allocate resources? At what point do you stop opening up schools, or do you open up more schools if people want to? So these are all sort of calls that everyone all over the country is grappling with.
Talking with Rachel Cohen of the American Prospect here on the Jeff Santos Show. We'll take your calls a little bit later at 772-925-8206. Rachel, let me ask you this question, because I think a lot of people, and we talked with Jan Schakowsky at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia the other day, a big proponent of Mr. Obama, a big supporter. But she said to me, the two issues that she really adamantly opposes her president from the same state, and she was early endorser from Illinois back in 2008, of course, Obama being from Illinois, and obviously she represents that area, congressional district in Chicago, that the two big issues were TPP and charter schools. Now, a lot of people have told me that, and these are, whether they are folks on the Democratic side or they are union officials, but who are backing Hillary Clinton, that the biggest concern they have is that you have Duncan, who is big charter school guy, and the policies of the Democratic president haven't been where a lot of progressives, those as you talk about at the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, and even some in Congress who are allies of the president. This has been a problem that has been resonating within the Democratic Party. What are your thoughts and what you've been hearing about that split? And is this good news to those, who are, looking for some other voices out there to join their chorus?
It's a good question. President Obama is definitely extremely friendly to the education reform agenda. It sort of goes under the radar in some respects, but he has been, pushed that forward more than, arguably anyone in some respects. And it's interesting because I've been following the comments that the Hillary Clinton campaign has been making on the campaign trail about charter schools and how she will, think about them. And a lot of the leaders of the education reform community are very nervous that she won't be as friendly to them as President Obama has been. So that's sort of a big concern. She has sort of, said somewhat vague things, like she said we won't support for-profit charter schools, but we should learn from the good ones, and we should spread best practices. And it's sort of hard to pin down right now exactly how she'll be, but there's definitely concern among those who are more supportive of education reform that she will be less friendly to their agenda than the current administration if she were elected. But yeah, I think that this is an issue that really does divide the Democratic Party's coalition. You have a group called the Democrats for Education Reform, and they hosted an event at the DNC, which I attended. But there were no union representatives, speaking, and I think that it's difficult to. I think that they can only go so long without meaningfully engaging one of the largest constituency of the Democratic Party if they're trying to shape education through the Democratic Party.
I know this wasn't a huge issue in the Democratic primary with Sanders and Clinton, but on the other hand, Sanders had a lot of supporters from particularly the base of the AFT and the NEA and badass teachers and others. And it would seem to me that if there is going to be a push, and if the Bernie Sanders supporters, do well in getting members of Congress who are more progressive than they've been in the past elected, that an issue like this will probably be, amongst the discussion, particularly if groups like the NAACP and Black Lives Matter are actually bringing it up on their own. Do you sense that this could have some momentum? The fact that an organization, an historic and civil rights icon organization like the NAACP, raising these questions, gives some pause to some people, and maybe that forms a coalition with labor unions like the AFT, the NEA, and the badass teachers, along with Sanders supporters. Is that at all a hope for some people who oppose charters?
I think. Yeah, I think that it raises many people who support the education reform community say we are acting on behalf of the civil rights community, and this is what the civil rights community wants. But I think as we're seeing with things like the NAACP's resolutions, that the civil rights community actually is divided on these issues. So, and they, some groups support it, but other groups don't. So if Democratic lawmakers feel like they need to be able to point to civil rights groups who are critical in order to advance different positions, they're starting to have those opportunities as, more groups are speaking out. So I think that if your question of does this create new opportunities for coalitions, I think, yeah, it does. And because you're seeing more often different groups, civil rights groups and different racial justice groups are, staking out sort of very divergent positions on these issues.
And finally, Rachel, is there a age gap, I guess? Are some Black Lives Matters members and some of the younger NAACP, is it those who are more likely to support charter schools, and is it the older? What is if there is a demographic breakdown, how does it fall? Younger people on one side, older on another, or male, female? How do you look at that in terms of the split amongst the NAACP, BLM, and others?
Well, I think it's also important to this isn't the Movement for Black Lives platform is not the Black Lives Matter positions per se, because there are other leaders in the Black Lives Matter movement who didn't sign on to the platform and don't agree with it. So that's just sort of a distinction that's worth keeping in mind.
Sure.
I don't really know the generational breakdowns of these issues. I mean, I know that I think if you are a parent, then parents. Well, no, yeah, I don't know that answer. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Talking with Rachel Cohen, the American Prospect, here on the Jeff Santos Show. No, my thought was that if you were getting younger people who tended to vote, for Bernie Sanders, who wanted to stay away from the idea of charter schools, even though, again, it wasn't a big issue for him, but a lot of his support came from, again, members of teachers union and so forth, who would obviously be against that. Now, maybe that could mean that older folks would be more likely to understand that charter schools is not the panacea. I don't know how it came down, but it'd be interesting to see whether or not those young millennials who came out in big numbers for Bernie, and are very much focused on reforming institutions, whether we're talking education or healthcare or other issues, whether they would look at this issue and say, well, we're not we're not helping African American kids. You know, the big issue is that you take the top of the straight A students, and then, you know, they go and they get a charter school, and then, you know, some Republican governor says, look, oh, it's great, everything is working out. This person went to college and they got a great job. In the meantime, there's 20 kids that don't make it, and what happens to them? And same time, the funding goes away for that inner city school that ends up some of the money going to charter schools. So I think that there's that as a background, if you might. Your final thoughts. We get about a minute.
My final thoughts on what you just said, or?
Yeah, well, that final thoughts period on the interview.
No, I mean, my final thoughts is just that I think this is a really interesting time, because I think that there have been, and I think this is an opportunity to really look at the differences of why people support and oppose these things. One difference that I noticed was that, the NAACP is very concerned with segregation and wants to promote integration of schools, but the Movements for Black Lives platform did not talk about integration in their education proposals. So, it's there are sort of big policy questions, and, can't paint with a big broad brush over, where people are at this moment. But I think there are a lot of new opportunities for organizing for people.
Rachel Cohen, correspondent for the American Prospect magazine. We really appreciate it. And obviously, Rachel, want to keep in touch with you as we move into the election cycle in the fall, as well as into the coming years, to see where this issue goes. It is one which I think we need to obviously focus upon. Appreciate your time very much. Rachel Cohen of the American Prospect. Again, you can check it out at the American Prospect website. Coming up in a few seconds is our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. We'll talk with him at about 34 minutes past. Again, you can always hear a replay of this show at jeffsantoshow.com. It's on a continuous 24-hour clock, and that clock means that once at 6 o'clock Eastern Time, we revert back to the first hour of this show, and it repeats after that on the 24/7 clock window. jeffsantoshow.com. Check it out. Rachel, thank you very much. We're right back. Mark Taylor-Canfield, he's on deck.
Some of you, I don't know if you watched, I gave a speech last Thursday. We live streamed the speech. And one of the things that I asked of people is I said, look, we need to have good people participating in politics at every level, from the school board on up. We had no idea how many people would respond to that call. And it went out, we said, please get back to berniesanders.com/win, W-I-N. You know what? 20,000 people in the last week responded. That's right. And these were, I think, mostly people who were prepared to run for office, and others who said, well, I don't want to run, but I want to help people in my community run for office. So let's talk about that one for a moment. And let me start off with a confession. I ran for mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont in 1981. If I had known how little I knew about municipal government, I never would have run. But I was arrogant and cocky, and I ran. And I won by 10 votes. And I had a very steep learning curve, let me tell you. All right, but here is the point. And by the way, my experience in municipal government before that is I went to one city council meeting and I fell asleep at the meeting. It was the most boring meeting I ever saw in my life. Sure, I fell asleep. That was my whole experience in city government. But I was too dumb to know any better, and I actually ran for office. So, my point is I have talked to people. I've talked to a lot of people. People say, well, yes, it's true, I have a PhD in education. I've read 18,000 books. I don't think I'm prepared to serve on the school board. I don't know enough. We got to get over that. You got to get over that. All right? Nobody knows everything. Trust me. I'm a United States Senator. I can confirm that. Nobody knows everything. Many of my colleagues know a lot less than you would think. But, all right. But here's the point. You can learn, and there are a lot of other great people there to help you. You can't be intimidated. One of the things the system does in so many ways is it intimidates us and tells us we can't do that. So what we need is people to be standing up, running for school board, and we need other people to be helping them win. And we need people to be running for city council, for mayor, for state legislature. We need good people with strong progressive ideas. And we are prepared to try to help you. And we have millions and millions of names. One of the things that we're doing right now is we have given support to a number, can't remember exactly how many, but a number of candidates running for Congress, running for state legislature. We help them raise money. We're giving them some help. That's one. And many others. And we are providing them the support they need to win. We want to help you also. So I would hope that people here will give real thought to figure out, everybody, has a different interest. Some of you may be interested in education, others, in city politics or whatever it may be, city government. But think about the role that you can play and jump into it and ask your friends and family to help you. It doesn't, especially at lower levels, doesn't take a whole lot of money to do that. Doesn't take a whole lot of expertise. You're smart, you can learn that stuff. How you get on the ballot, how you knock on doors, the kind of literature you need, the kind of website that you need, you can figure those things out. But my message today is that we need all over this country thousands and thousands of good people to jump into the political process, and we are prepared to try to work with you to make that happen. Okay?
Four minutes.